Revenge with Karen.
The air in the Langford family office doesn't smell like money. Money has a smell. It's usually old leather, fresh ink, or the metallic tang of a vault door. But wealth, true, generational, empire-building wealth smells like absolutely nothing. It is the scent of aggressive climate control, hermetically sealed silence, and the kind of negative space that costs $500 a square foot in downtown DC. I was sitting in my office, glass-walled enclosure that looked more like a sterile lab than an IT department, watching the network traffic flow like a digital pulse across my triple-monitor setup. My name is Naomi. On the org chart, I'm listed as head of information systems and security. To Grant Langford, the patriarch of this investment dynasty, I am the gatekeeper. I don't just fix printers. I build the digital fortresses that keep the family's billions safe from hackers, foreign states, more often than not, their own bad judgment. I took a sip of my espresso, savoring the bitter heat. It was 9:15 a.m. The markets were open, the data streams were green, and for a fleeting moment, the world was orderly. Then the glass door to my suite shuddered on its hinges. Cameron Langford didn't walk into rooms, he invaded them. At 27, Cameron was the physical embodiment of a trust fund poured into a suit that was too tight in the shoulders and too short in the ankles. He had his father's jawline, but none of his father's discipline. He breezed past my administrative assistant, his voice booming at a volume that violated at least 3 unspoken HR policies. "Naomi, where is she? I need this handled like yesterday." I didn't spin my chair around immediately. I finished typing a command line that re-encrypted the daily ledger backups. Only then did I turn, composing my face into a mask of polite, corporate neutrality. "Good morning, Cameron," I said, my voice level. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" He slammed a sleek, platinum-colored laptop onto my desk, narrowly missing my coffee. "Things a brick, total garbage. I'm trying to pull up the AlphaStream projections for the crypto venture meeting. It's just giving me the spinning wheel of death. Fix it." He didn't ask, he ordered. That was Cameron's default setting. He treated me like a vending machine, insert demand, receive compliance. "Did you submit a ticket?" I asked, knowing the answer. "Ticket? I don't have time for bureaucratic nonsense, Naomi. I have a meeting with the partners in 20 minutes. Just work your magic. Do the IT girl thing, IT girl." I've spent 15 years in cybersecurity. I've consulted for the Treasury. I built the architecture that protects his inheritance from being siphoned off by Russian botnets. And to him, I was the IT girl. I pulled the laptop toward me. It was hot to the touch. "Unlock it, please." He huffed, leaning over me in a cloud of artisanal oud cologne that cost more than my first car. He typed his password. I watched his fingers. 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 LNGFORD. Mentally noted that I would need to force a password, reset across the entire executive tier by noon. It was embarrassing. "While I look at this," I said, keeping my eyes on the screen, "you might want to check the status of your credentials." We sent out a memo about 2-factor authentication updates. By the way, if you're enjoying this glimpse into the chaotic lives of the ultra-wealthy and the people who have to clean up their messes, maybe hit subscribe or drop a like. Keeps the coffee flowing and the stories coming. We wouldn't want you locked out during a trade. Yeah, I saw the email. Boring. Just make it work." He pulled out his phone, instantly bored, scrolling through what looked like an influencer's Instagram feed. I opened the event logs on his machine. My eyes narrowed. The spinning wheel wasn't a hardware failure, it was a resource drain. The CPU was running at 100%. I dug a layer deeper. "Cameron," I said, my tone sharpening just a fraction, "have you been downloading third-party applications? Specifically, anything related to mining?" He stiffened. "I'm exploring alternative revenue streams for the firm. It's research." I looked at the logs. He had installed a sketchy cryptocurrency mining bot on a company-issued device, connected to the firm's secure internal network. It was like lighting a match in a room full of dynamite. He wasn't just slowing down his laptop, he was creating a backdoor that any half-competent hacker could drive a truck through. "You bypassed the admin restrictions," I stated. "How?" He smirked, a look that made me want to remotely wipe his digital existence. "I have a guy. Look, Naomi, don't give me the lecture. Just clear the cache or whatever so I can present. Dad wants me to take lead on the tech portfolio, and I can't look like I don't know how to use a computer." Dad wants me to take lead. Words hung in the air. Grant Langford was a shark, but he was a prudent shark. He wouldn't put Cameron in charge of a toaster, let alone the tech portfolio, unless this was a test. I looked at Cameron, really looked at him. He was sweating slightly. He wasn't just arrogant, he was desperate. He needed this presentation to work to prove he wasn't just a waste of genetic material. I made a decision. I could report this violation to compliance right now, would trigger an audit. Cameron would get a slap on the wrist, he'd blame me for snitching, and nothing would change. Or I could let him keep digging. I can stabilize it for the meeting, I said, typing a command that merely suspended the mining process rather than deleting it. But this machine is compromised, Cameron. I'll need it back tonight for a full scrub. Fine, whatever. Just give it here. He snatched the laptop back before I had even fully withdrawn my hand. See, was that so hard? You tech people always make everything a drama. He spun on his heel and marched out, presumably to go lie to a room full of investors. I sat in the silence he left behind. The scent of his cologne lingered, masking the sterile air. I turned back to my triple monitors. I didn't go back to my routine maintenance. Instead, I opened a new terminal window. I typed in a command to mirror his laptop's activity to a secure, partitioned sandbox on my private server. He wanted to be a tech lead. He wanted to bypass my security protocols because he had a guy. Okay, Cameron, I whispered to the empty room. Let's see what else you're hiding. The storm had blown in, loud and messy. But he had no idea he had just walked into the eye of a hurricane I was about to engineer. The game was on, and unlike him, I knew the rules. Langford family office at 9:00 p.m. was a different beast entirely. The frantic energy of the trading day had evaporated, leaving behind the hum of servers and the low, throbbing blue light of the standby LEDs. The cleaners were moving like ghosts through the hallways, vacuuming the plush carpets, but in my glass box, the work was just beginning. I cracked a fresh bottle of sparkling water. Carbonation bit at my tongue as I brought up the sandbox environment I had created earlier. Cameron's laptop was now a digital open book to me. He had returned it to me at 5:00 p.m., tossing it onto my desk with a muttered "It worked, thanks," before heading out to a happy hour that would likely last until dawn. He thought the issue was resolved. He thought I was just going to run a virus scan and wipe the screen. He was wrong. I started sifting through the logs, not looking for errors this time, but for patterns. In cybersecurity, we look for anomalies, spikes in data transfer, logins at strange hours, connections to unverified IP addresses. The first thing I found was the VPN usage. Now, using a virtual private network isn't a crime. We mandate it for all remote work. But Cameron wasn't tunneling into our secure DC node. He was routing his traffic through a kaleidoscope of jurisdictions. Panama, the Seychelles, Cyprus. Why do you need a Panamanian IP address to check your email, Cameron? I muttered, scrolling through the timestamps. I cross-referenced the timestamps with the building's physical security logs. At the exact moments his laptop was bouncing signals off a server in Panama, Cameron was physically sitting in his office. I dug deeper. I pulled up the packet captures, raw data of what he was actually sending and receiving. It was encrypted, obviously, but he was sloppy. He was using a consumer-grade encryption tool, something you could download for free, thinking it made him invisible. It took me less than 10 minutes to crack the handshake key. When the data unspooled on my center monitor, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just crypto mining. That was a distraction, a smokescreen. Cameron was transferring files, massive PDF files. I opened one. It was a dossier on the Project Helios acquisition, a deal Grant Langford had been negotiating in secret for 6 months. It contained proprietary valuations, environmental impact reports that hadn't been released to the public, and leverage points against the sellers. This was highly classified internal data. If this leaked, the deal would implode, and the Langford stock would take a hit that would bleed millions in minutes. I checked the destination. An external Dropbox account, anonymous. My finger hovered over the phone. I should call Grant. I should call legal. This was corporate espionage, plain and simple. The idiot son was selling the family silver out the back door, probably to fund a gambling debt or impress some shady new business partner. But then I paused. The file transfer was dated 3 days ago, but the file size, it was slightly off. Compared it to the original on our secure drive. Cameron's version was 2 MB smaller. I analyzed the metadata. He hadn't just sent it, he had altered it. I opened the two documents side by side. In the valuation column, Cameron had changed a few key integers. He had inflated the projected liabilities of the acquisition target. Why? If he leaked this, he wasn't just sabotaging the deal, he was trying to tank the price. My mind raced. The price tanked, the deal would fall through. Or the Langford family could buy it cheaper. No, Grant wouldn't play that dirty with his own data. This was Cameron acting alone. Was he shorting the stock, betting against his own father? I pulled up the surveillance footage from the server room hallway. I rewound 3 days. There he was. Tuesday, 7:45 p.m. Cameron walking down the corridor. He stopped near the secondary server rack, the physical backup. He looked around, checking for cameras. He looked right at the dome camera in the ceiling, but he clearly thought it was a blind spot. It wasn't. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket, a black, unbranded stick. He plugged it into the maintenance port of the smart thermostat on the wall. I blinked. The thermostat? I accessed the thermostat's logs. Clever. Stupid, but clever. He was using the EOT, Internet of Things network, the network that controlled the lights and temperature, bridge a connection to the guest Wi-Fi, bypassing the corporate firewall. He was using the building's own infrastructure to smuggle the data out. You didn't come up with this, Cameron, I said softly. You're not this smart. Someone was guiding him. Someone was feeding him instructions on how to penetrate the fortress I had built. I sat back, the blue light washing over my face. If I reported him now, he'd claim ignorance. He'd say he lost the USB drive, or that he was hacked. He'd throw enough money at lawyers to muddy the waters, and Grant, out of paternal guilt, might hesitate. I needed more. I needed undeniable proof of intent. I needed to catch him not just holding the smoking gun, but pulling the trigger. I closed the evidence folder and encrypted it within a hidden partition on my own drive, labeling it System Diagnostics V4. Then, I did something that went against every instinct I had as a security professional. I opened the firewall port he had been using. I widened the channel. I cleared the logs on the thermostat so he wouldn't know I'd seen him. I was going to let him do it again. But this time, I wouldn't just be watching. I'd be tagging every single digital dollar he touched with a radioactive isotope that would lead right back to his trust fund. Go ahead, Cameron, I whispered, turning off the monitors one by one. Get greedy. The summons came the next morning via a handwritten note left on my desk. No email, no calendar invite, just a piece of heavy cream cardstock with Grant Langford's initials embossed at the top. Naomi, 10 o'clock a.m. The library. The library was Grant's sanctuary. It was a room that felt like it belonged in a 19th century English manor, transplanting directly into the steel and glass heart of DC. It was soundproofed, swept for bugs weekly, and was the only room in the building with a working fireplace. I arrived at 9:59 a.m. Grant was standing by the window, looking out at the Capitol dome in the distance. He didn't turn when I entered. He just gestured to the leather armchair opposite his desk. Coffee, he asked. His voice was gravel and oak, worn smooth by decades of negotiation. Black, please. Thank you, Grant. He poured from a silver carafe. Grant was 68, but he moved with the economy of a man who knew exactly how much energy every action cost. He handed me the cup and sat down, folding his hands on the desk. There were no papers in front of him. That was never a good sign. How is the system, Naomi? He asked. Secure, I replied automatically. We repelled a localized DDoS attempt from a botnet in Eastern Europe yesterday. Standard probing. Nothing penetrated. He nodded, his eyes fixed on mine. They were pale blue, uncomfortably piercing. And the internal threats? My pulse didn't jump, but the air in the room seemed to grow heavier. Internal threat vectors are always the most difficult to predict, I said carefully. Human error remains our largest vulnerability. Human error, he repeated, tasting the words. Is that what we're calling it? He knew. He didn't know the specifics. He didn't know about the thermostat or the Panamanian VPN. He knew something was rotting in the kingdom. Grant Langford didn't build a billion-dollar empire by being oblivious to the character of the people around him, especially his own blood. Cameron came to see me yesterday, Grant said, leaning back. He was very enthusiastic about the tech portfolio. He used a lot of buzzwords. Synergy, blockchain integration. He wants full administrative privileges to audit the accounts himself. I kept my face perfectly still. Would be highly irregular. It violates the separation of duties principle. No single individual should have authorization to move capital and modify the logs of those movements. I agree, Grant said. He picked up a pen and turned it over in his fingers. However, Cameron feels that I am stifling his potential. He believes he is ready to hold the keys. He dropped the pen. It made a sharp clack on the mahogany. Naomi, he said, his voice dropping an octave, built this firm on trust. Not the blind kind, the verified kind. If the foundation is cracked, I need to know before I build another floor on top of it. Do you understand? I understand, I said. If I were to, hypothetically, grant him a probationary period of elevated access, Grant said, watching me closely, would you be able to ensure that any damage is contained? Hypothetically. This was the order. It wasn't written down, it wasn't recorded. It was as binding as a court order. He was asking me to give Cameron enough rope to hang himself, while promising to catch the body before it hit the floor. If that were to happen, I said, choosing my words with surgical precision, I would create a mirrored environment. A simulation that looks and feels like the live ledger. He would see real numbers, real accounts. But any transactions he initiated would be held in a sublayer, pending secondary authorization. Wouldn't know the difference until the authorization was either granted or denied. Grant's lips twitched. It was almost a smile. A sandbox, a quicksand box, I corrected. Grant stood up. The meeting was over. You have always been the most valuable asset in this building, Naomi. Don't let me down. I won't, sir. I walked out of the library with my heart hammering against my ribs. I had just been given the green light to entrap the heir apparent. As I walked back to the elevators, I passed Cameron in the hallway. He was laughing loudly into his phone, holding a Starbucks cup. Yeah, bro, I'm telling you, the old man is softening up, he was saying. I'll have the liquidity by Friday. We're going to the moon. He locked eyes with me as I passed. He winked. A smug, victorious wink. Hey, IT girl, he called out, lowering the phone. My laptop is running great. You actually did something right. I aim to please, Cameron, he said, stepping into the elevator. The doors closed, cutting off his laughter. I watched the numbers climb as the elevator ascended back to my tower. You'll have the liquidity by Friday? I thought. No, Cameron, by Friday, you won't even have a functioning ID badge. Grant had opened the cage. Now I just had to wait for the animal to walk into the trap. By Wednesday, the atmosphere in the office had shifted. It was subtle, like a drop in barometric pressure before a thunderstorm. Cameron had been given his probationary access, which he interpreted as being crowned emperor. I watched him from the periphery of the executive dining room. It was noon. I usually ate at my desk, dissecting code while I chewed on a salad, but today I needed eyes on the target. Cameron was holding court at the center table, surrounded by two junior analysts who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else, and a sycophantic external consultant named Todd. Problem with this place, Cameron said, his voice carrying easily over the clink of silverware, is that it's stuck in the 90s. Dad loves his safe, slow growth. Real estate, bonds, yawn. He gestured with a forkful of seared tuna. We need velocity. I've been looking at the internal ledgers, which, by the way, are a mess, and the capital is just sitting there, sleeping. I'm going to wake it up. One of the analysts, a sharp young woman named Sarah, cleared her throat. But Cameron, liquidity ratios are set by the risk committee. We can't just move that capital without triggering regulatory flags. Cameron laughed. It was a dismissive, barking sound. Regulations are for people who ask permission, Sarah. I'm talking about restructuring. Once I finalize the new architecture on Friday, those ratios won't matter because the assets will be reclassified. I'm cleaning house. I took a sip of my iced tea. Cleaning house was talking about money laundering. He just didn't know the legal term for it. He thought he was being a visionary. He was actually describing a federal crime. I glanced at my phone. My custom monitoring app was running in the background. It showed Cameron's active session. He had logged in 20 minutes ago from his iPad at the table. He wasn't just talking. Under the table, while he ate, he was authorizing test transfers. I saw the notifications scroll by on my screen. User, C. Langford attempt. Transfer asset ID hash 8892 destination. Ext wallet HK status. Pending ghost protocol. He was trying to move $100,000 in bonds to a Hong Kong wallet. In his view on his iPad, the screen likely said processing or success. In reality, the request had been routed directly to my trash bin, with a copy saved to the evidence folder. You know, Cameron continued, leaning back and unbuttoning his suit jacket. I might need to bring in my own people for the tech side, too. No offense to the current team, but we need innovators. Disruptors. He cast a glance toward my table. He didn't think I could hear him, or maybe he wanted me to hear him. We need people who understand that security shouldn't be a roadblock, he said loudly. Security should be an enabler. If the firewall stops me from making money, firewall is the problem. I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. The firewall stops you from going to prison, you idiot. The consultant, Todd, nodded vigorously. Absolutely, Cameron, frictionless capital, that's the future. Exactly, Cameron beamed, frictionless. He stood up, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin and tossing it onto his half-eaten meal. All right, boys and girls. I've got trades to execute. Big things coming, try to keep up. Strutted out of the dining room, the analysts exchanging terrified looks behind his back. I waited a beat, then stood up and walked over to their table. Sarah looked up, her eyes wide. Naomi, she stammered, we didn't mean to. It's fine, Sarah, I said, my voice calm. Eat your lunch. He's talking about reclassifying the Tier 1 assets, she whispered. Naomi, if he does that, the tax liability alone would. Don't worry about the assets, I interrupted softly. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Focus on your work. Let the system handle the errors. She looked at me, confused. The system? Just keep your head down, Sarah. I walked back to my office, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble. Cameron's arrogance had reached critical mass. He believed he had successfully moved the money. He believed he was immune to the rules. When I got back to my desk, I saw he had escalated. He wasn't just moving money now, he was changing permissions. He was trying to revoke my administrative access. I watched the command come in, revoke user, NROS admin level 5. I smiled. It was cute, like a toddler trying to lock his parents out of the house with a plastic toy key. I allowed the command to execute in the simulation. On his screen, I would appear to be locked out. Let him feel safe. Let him feel powerful. Let him think the castle was his, because when the drawbridge finally went up, he was going to find himself on the wrong side of the moat. The call came at 2:00 p.m. on Thursday. Naomi, Cameron's voice was smooth, lacking the usual bark. It was his I need a favor voice. Hey, do you have a sec? I'm hitting a snag with the legacy dashboard. It's glitching. I can come up, I said. I grabbed my tablet, my real weapon, and took the elevator to the 40th floor. Cameron's office was larger than mine, corner positioned with a view of the Potomac, but it was a mess. Papers were strewn everywhere, not in piles of work, but in piles of neglect. He was sitting behind his desk, staring at his screen with manic intensity. So, he said, swiveling his chair, here's the thing. I've successfully migrated the initial tranches. He hadn't, but when I try to access the master trust vehicle, it's asking for a physical key authentication. I thought I had full clearance. I stood behind him, looking at the screen. He was trying to access the Langford Legacy Trust, the crown jewels, the fund that held the family's voting shares and the core real estate assets. This wasn't just play money. This was the control mechanism for the entire empire. That's a hard-coded security feature, I lied smoothly. Because those assets are so old, the system requires a manual override for the first access. It's a legacy protocol from your grandfather's time. Right, he nodded. Patient, so how do we override it? I need to verify the holdings for the audit. I can bypass it for you, I said, but I'll need to enter my root credentials. Since you revoked my admin access earlier, I let the sentence hang. He froze. He turned to look at me, a flicker of panic in his eyes. What? I didn't. It's okay, Cameron, I said, offering a tight, forgiving smile. The system is glitchy, like you said. Sometimes it drops permissions randomly. I can re-authenticate myself temporarily to help you. Relief washed over his face. He bought it. He actually bought it. He was so convinced of his own brilliance that he couldn't imagine I knew exactly what he had tried to do. Yeah, must be a bug, he laughed nervously. Go ahead, work your magic. I leaned over and typed in a string of code. I wasn't just unlocking the folder, I was activating a keystroke logger and a screen recorder that would be admissible in federal court. I was also tagging this specific session with a digital watermark, unauthorized access attempt level 1. There, I said, you're in. The screen refreshed. The list of assets appeared, billions of dollars in property and stock. Cameron's eyes widened. It was pure greed, a hunger so raw it was almost obscene. Okay, he muttered, practically vibrating. Okay, thanks, Naomi. Can go now? Are you sure? I asked, stepping back toward the door. These ledgers are complex. If you enter the wrong sell order, it executes instantly. I know what I'm doing, he snapped, his mask slipping. I went to Wharton Naomi. I can read a balance sheet. Leave. I walked out, closing the heavy oak door behind me. I didn't go to the elevator. I stood in the hallway, opened my tablet, and put on my noise-canceling earbuds. I listened to the sound of his typing. Click, 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 click. On my tablet, I watched the commands appear in real time. Command, liquidate position asset, 400 Pennsylvania Ave buyer, Shell Corp Helios limited price, 40% market value. My breath hitched. He was selling the headquarters building, to himself, or to the shell company he had set up. And he was doing it at a 60% discount. He was gutting the company. He wasn't just trying to make a profit, he was trying to steal the building we were standing in. I watched him confirm the transaction. Confirm, Y/N, he hit Y. On his screen, a green checkmark appeared, transaction successful. On my screen, a red banner flashed, fraud detected, assets frozen, evidence logged. I took off my earbuds. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of it. He had just attempted the largest corporate theft in the firm's history, from his father's office. I stood 10 feet away. You didn't just fail the test, Cameron, I whispered. You just signed your resignation. I headed for the stairs. I needed to get to the server room physically. The final act required a hard switch that couldn't be done remotely. It was time to pull the plug. The basement server room was the coldest place in the building. It was kept at a constant 62 degrees, a hum of white noise that drowned out the world above. I swiped my badge, only badge with unrestricted access to the sector, and the biometric scanner read my retina. The doors hissed open. I sat at the main terminal, the God console. Upstairs, Cameron was likely popping champagne. In his mind, he had just sold the headquarters to his shell company for pennies on the dollar, and was now waiting for the settlement funds to hit his account. I brought up the financial gateway. There it was. Quest to wire $45 million in settlement funds to a routing number in the Cayman Islands. Bank of the Caymans. Account holder, Veritas Holdings. I ran a quick script on Veritas Holdings. It had been registered 3 days ago. The registered agent, a P.O. box in a strip mall in Nevada. The same strip mall where Cameron's consultant, Todd, had a registered LLC. They were sloppy. They were so incredibly sloppy. I hovered my hand over the keyboard. This was the moment. If I blocked it now, it was just an attempted error. Cameron could claim he clicked the wrong button. He could claim it was a simulation exercise he was running for stress testing. But if I let it hit the SWIFT network, that was wire fraud. That was federal. I needed it to go one step further. I needed him to try to convert it. I authorized the packet to leave our internal sandbox and hit the external gateway. I routed it into a holding loop I controlled at our partner bank. To Cameron, it would look like the money had arrived in the Cayman account. I switched views to the mirror of his screen. He refreshed the Cayman Bank portal, which, unbeknownst to him, was a spoofed site I was injecting into his browser. Balance, $45 million and 0 cents. I saw him pump his fist in the air via the webcam. He picked up his phone. He dialed Todd. We're rich, baby. Shouted, it cleared. No flags. The IT bitch didn't even notice. The IT bitch. Okay, Cameron said into the phone. Now initiate the buy, Bitcoin, all of it. Wash it before they wake up. There it was. The intent to launder. Inheritance simulation. Failed, I typed into a secure chat window that was linked only to Grant Langford's private tablet. I attached the audio file of him saying wash it. I attached the logs of the sale. Attached the IP trace of the Cayman account. I waited. 3 dots appeared on the chat window. Grant was typing. Do what needs to be done. Secure the assets. Terminate the threat. That was it. No emotion. No my poor son. Just business. I looked at the transaction pending in the crypto exchange queue. Cameron was trying to convert $45 million of his father's money into Bitcoin. I typed a command, override auth code black. I paused the transaction. I didn't cancel it, I froze it. Then I opened the system-wide directory. I found Cameron's user profile, Cameron Langford, Executive Vice President. I moved the cursor to the active status toggle, but not yet. There was one more thing I needed to do. I needed to make sure he knew exactly who ended him. I opened a dialog box on his screen. A system administrator message. I typed, error 404, integrity not found. I didn't hit send yet. I wanted to see his face when it happened. I locked the console and stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I checked my reflection in the dark glass of a server rack. I looked calm. I looked professional. I walked out of the server room and headed for the elevator. It was time for the face-to-face. Before I went to confront Cameron, I made a detour to the legal archives on the 12th floor. This wasn't strictly necessary for the technical lockout. Naomi Ross doesn't do things by halves. If you're going to shoot the king, you don't just use a bullet. You use a signed, notarized, and tripartite-approved cannonball. I met with Aliner, the firm's general counsel. Alina was a woman who could smile while handing you a foreclosure notice. She was waiting for me. "Is it time?" she asked, her hands resting on a thick file folder. "Clause 12C, I said. "Immediate invocation." Clause 12C was a buried provision in the family trust bylaws. It stated that in the event of demonstrable incompetence or malicious action by a beneficiary, the trustee grant could delegate total control of the assets to a designated technological custodian for a lockdown period of 72 hours. That custodian was me. Alina opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Grant's signature already at the bottom. The date field was blank. "Signed this 3 years ago," Alina said softly. He knew this day might come. I picked up a pen and filled in the date. December 16th. Once I countersigned this, I told her, I am legally moving the entire Langford portfolio, roughly $4 billion in managed assets, into the Black Vault. The Black Vault wasn't a physical safe. It was an air-gapped server off-site, disconnected from the internet, accessible only by 2 physical keys turning simultaneously. Moving the digital ownership tokens there, I was effectively taking the money off the grid. Cameron could hack, scream, or sue all he wanted. The money simply wouldn't exist on any network he could reach. "Do it," Alina said. I signed. I pulled out my phone and initiated the final sequence code linked to the contract. Initiating Protocol Obsidian. On my phone screen, a progress bar appeared. Migrating assets, 10%, 30%, upstairs. Cameron's money in the Cayman account, which was just a digital phantom I had created, would still be visible to him. He would think he was rich. But the real assets, the actual deeds and bonds, were vanishing from the system, sliding into the darkness of the Black Vault. Migrating assets, 80%, 100%. Transfer complete. System locked. I looked at Alina. The building is now effectively empty of value. It's just furniture and people. One very exposed liability, Alina added. I nodded. I'm going to remove the liability now. I drafted a final internal memo on my secure pad. Subject: Incident Report #9982 Internal Threat Neutralization. I attached the video of Cameron's Wash It phone call, the key logs of him selling the building, and the countersigned Clause 12C. I sent it to the board of directors. By the time I reached the elevator, every board member's phone would be buzzing. They would see the evidence. They would see that the company had been saved, not by Cameron, but from him. The elevator chimed. I stepped in and pressed the button for the 40th floor. My heart rate was steady, 65 beats per minute. This was the part I enjoyed. The coding was the work. The confrontation, that was the art. I didn't have to go to Cameron. He came to me. I had just returned to my glass office when I heard him. Wasn't walking, he was running. "Naomi," he burst through the door, his face a mask of red-blotched fury. He was holding his laptop like he wanted to use it as a weapon. "What did you do?" he screamed. Spittle flew from his mouth. "What did you do to the network?" I sat behind my desk, hands folded. "I'm afraid you'll have to be more specific, Cameron. I manage a very large network." He slammed the laptop down. "My accounts, they're gone, all of them." I tried to transfer the Bitcoin out to a cold wallet, and the screen just went black. "Now it won't turn on. It says access denied. Fix it." "Access denied," I repeated slowly. "That usually means you don't have permission." "I have permission. I'm the executive vice president. I own this place." He was shaking. "Reboot the server. Reset the router. I don't care what you have to do. Just get my screen back up." "I have $45 million in limbo." I stood up. "Rush?" I took my time. "Actually, Cameron," I said, my voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet tone I used for catastrophic system failures, "you have $0. He blinked. "What? The 45 million you saw, that was a simulation, a mirrored interface. You've been playing a video game for the last 3 days. You're lying." He laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "I saw the transfer. I saw the bank confirmation." "You saw what I wanted you to see," I said. "I intercepted your packets at the router level. I redirected your VPN. I watched you sell the headquarters. I watched you try to launder the money through the Caymans, and I recorded every single keystroke." I tapped my keyboard. The large monitor on the wall behind me flickered to life. It showed the video clip of him. "Wash it before they wake up." Cameron's face went pale. The color drained out of him so fast he looked like he might faint. That's illegal." Stammered. "You wiretapped me." "I audited you," I corrected, "on company equipment, on company time, under the explicit instruction of the trustee. My father," he choked out, "my father will fire you. He'll sue you into the ground. You're just IT, you're nobody. I'm the person who holds the keys, Cameron," I said, "and I just changed the locks." I reached over and picked up his platinum laptop. Hey, give that back. I typed a single command, sudo wipe device force. Screen flashed white, then went permanently black. There, I said, pushing the dead brick of aluminum back toward him. I fixed it. It won't give you any more trouble. He stared at the laptop. Then he stared at me. His hands were curling into fists. For a second, I thought he might actually swing at me. You ruined me, he whispered. Why? Why would you do this? Because you were sloppy, I said cold. And because you called me IT girl. The air in the room was electric. Broken. The arrogant prince had been stripped naked in the town square. Get out of my office, I said, and Cameron, your badge has been deactivated. You'll need security to swipe you out of the building. He opened his mouth to scream, to rage, to threaten. But then the door behind him opened. Cameron spun around. Grant Langford stood in the doorway. He wasn't alone. Behind him were two large men in dark suits, private security, not the building rent-a-cops. Dad, Cameron gasped. He rushed forward, his hands out. Dad, thank God, she's crazy. She hacked my accounts. She's trying to steal the portfolio. You have to arrest her. Grant didn't move. He didn't look at his son. He looked past him directly at me. Is it done? Grant asked. The assets are in the black vault, I replied. The threat has been neutralized. The evidence has been sent to the board. Dad, Cameron's voice trembled. What is she talking about? Grant finally looked at his son. Look wasn't angry. It was disappointed, which is infinitely worse. I gave you a rope, Cameron, Grant said softly. I hoped you would use it to climb. Instead, you used it to try and strangle this company. I was making us money, Cameron pleaded. I was modernizing. You were stealing, Grant said. And you were doing it badly. Grant nodded to the security guards. They stepped forward, flanking Cameron. Escort him out, Grant said. If he returns to the premises, treat it as a trespassing violation. You can't do this. Cameron screamed as they grabbed his arms. I'm your son. I'm a partner. You're a liability, Grant said. They dragged him out. Cameron was still shouting about lawsuits and his rights as they disappeared down the hallway. The noise faded, swallowed by the heavy soundproofing of the office. Silence returned. The beautiful, expensive silence of the Langford family office. Grant walked over to the window of my office, looked out at the city below. He'll be cut off, Grant said, almost to himself. The trust provides a stipend, but he has no access to capital. He'll have to find a job. He has a degree from Wharton, I said dryly. I'm sure he'll find something. Grant turned to me. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You stopped a $45 million theft and secured $4 billion in assets in under 72 hours, he said. You did it without disrupting a single legitimate trade. Just doing my job, sir. No, Grant said. Your job description is systems lead. This, he gestured to the black screen of the monitor. This was the work of a trustee. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it on my desk. New credentials, he said, and a new title. Executive Director of Risk and Operations. It comes with a seat on the board, a significant equity stake. I looked at the box. I didn't open it yet. Thank you, Grant. You earned it, Naomi. You're the only one who passed the test. He nodded once, then turned and walked out. I sat alone in my glass box. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the DC skyline. I picked up my cold coffee and took a sip. It tasted terrible, but I didn't care. I opened the velvet box. Inside was a heavy, black key card. No name, just a gold chip and the Langford crest, the keys to the kingdom. I turned back to my triple monitors. I typed one final command. System status, green, all secure. Cameron was gone. The money was safe. And the IT girl was now the one holding the leash. I smiled just a little and went back to work.
Not every victory needs applause or a corner office. Sometimes walking away with your dignity is the real promotion. Thanks for being here, Well. I'll catch you in the next story.